Hello, students. This is Professor Patti, and we are in week 3 of Advanced Generalist Practice with Communities Online. So this week, we've got a Minkler and Wallerstein article. We have a Gutierrez and Lewis article, which for the moment, you also have a public YouTube video to listen along. So read, take notes, listen, and kind of be thinking about your strategy formation. Today, I have some of the resources I'm going to be using in our PowerPoint slide. And also we have our interview with Reverend Doug Horner, who's adapted strategies for many communities across Ohio and other places where he's lived, worked, and been purpose-driven. So today, we are starting by talking about the Minkler and Wallerstein article. So what is community organizing? What is a community organizer? What are some strategies that can shape it? Because we're not just showing up. We're not just getting people together. So Minkler and Wallerstein, right in the beginning of their article, or in the beginning of their research, I believe I think these are both chapters in textbook now that I'm thinking about it. They talk about process-oriented, task-oriented, or combined process and task-oriented activities. So I thought I would use one of my favorite examples of how we set up goals that are process goals versus outcome goals. So a process goal is something that is methodical. So in Southeast Ohio, I am an external person. I am not a member of the community. So my approach should be process-oriented at first. I should really be thinking about the qualitative questions, the qualitative research questions of how shall I proceed? Why will I be doing it that way? Those are our two. The quantitative research questions of how much, how many, what are the outcomes? Those are outcome-based. Task-oriented is when I've now been working in this community, I've been observing in this community, I've been volunteering in this community for about 2 years, so I'm not a total outsider. So someone who has begun to, and they've got specific language in the article, but begun to have an affiliation with the community, but is not a key decision maker, would be task-oriented then. So now I'm moving into, these are the committees that I can join where my skills are really helpful. And maybe on our committees, we're talking about the tasks for the 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. Right now there's a project 2050 Barnesville. So what are tasks that need to be done? That's social planning. That's a different kind of community planning. Locality development, we're not just thinking about municipal, village, infrastructure resources. We're talking about understanding who is in the community and how we can help people feel empowered. Task-oriented is there are people who are empowered, who have groups that we have identified accurately and noted whose voice. And now we think, how can these people join and what's their next task? Social action is for people who are within a community group who are affecting change, which maybe you are in your community already, an invested, formal, informal source of power. Maybe you're working as an agent of an infrastructure that contains a lot of power or agency, and then you're evaluating the task and the process in order to ask, how can we help this community approach their problem-solving skills and develop their problem-solving skills to be able to take it away from here? A little more on process and outcome goals. These are outcome goals for people who love to work out. I really want to lose weight. That's the outcome I'm desiring, right? So people who say, I'd like there to be a train running in Barnesville, and I don't care how we get there, but that's my goal, right? I would like to gain muscle. This is not necessarily that it's a good or a bad thing to have an outcome goal. It's just a question of what is the target that we're aiming for, because that's going to help us understand what problem-solving strategy we need and who might also be interested in this outcome goal. I would like to improve my health. My doctors might be very motivated to improve my health. I might need to engage a nutritionist, right? Or a rheumatologist, because they also are interested in improving my health. So there's people with other skills and objectives that will help me get to these outcomes. It helps me develop my strategy and my partners if I know I want to learn about my nutrition. Now, I'm working on my health. What if I have process goals? I have a goal to work out. I want to lift weights 3 times a week for the next month. If I gain, if I lose, if I eat nothing but French fries the entire month, I can still meet that goal because my process goal is I want to lift weights 3 times a week. When I was working on rapid rehousing, we had a wonderful, I wish I could remember her last name, but we had a wonderful policy analyst named Allison, who said her favorite quote: "If we worry about the process, the outcomes take care of themselves," which really was, she was our HMIS therapist. If you enter your HMIS data every week on the same day, the outcome is going to be either that we're going to have compliance with entering HMIS data because you've just worried about your little piece and everyone's worried about their little piece. And then we have all this information. If my process goal for losing weight, this is an outcome goal. I want to learn about nutrition. Well, I've met with my nutritionist and she said I need 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass. So I would like to weigh 170 pounds. I need to eat probably 150 grams of protein a day. If I do that every day, I have consulted my nutritionist. We have developed some problem solving. I am going to gain muscle. I might also lose some weight. I have a process goal that I would like to sleep 8 to 10 hours a night, 6 days a week. Do you see how that changes my strategy for how I'm living my life? And this is a very different process goal, lifting 3 times a week than sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night. How do I plan my activities? How do I plan my emotional budget? How do I plan my financial budget to be able to meet that? Well, on an individual level, on a family level, on a group level, on a community level, we make plans to meet certain goals. We have goals in this state for libraries to be places of community, right? And so as an Ohio resident who was born in the city of Cleveland and lives in Fairview Park, Ohio, here I am at Barnesville Hutton Memorial Library using their resources, because in the state of Ohio, we don't just want communities, libraries to be places where people can meet. We have policies. We have policies in the state of Ohio that every single library, city, county, regional, will admit you if they receive state of Ohio funds, and that you can borrow and you have privileges. Even the Cleveland State Library is a community library and people have limited privileges there. Those are policy decisions. Those are financial decisions. Those are infrastructure decisions that are made to support the community. So I love to talk about High Point, North Carolina, and I don't know if I have my view optimized, but I wanted to share with you in High Point, they have this domestic violence initiative, which we've got the link. And there is a 1-minute video here. And no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to show the face. The face of the man who's speaking, this guy. I got to meet Marty Summer when I was working on the Bureau of Justice Associates Innovations and Supervision grant, and he came. When you have a BJA grant, it's 3 years long for violence reduction initiatives, and at the start, and then annually in the middle, and then annually at the end, you have to attend these 3 conferences. So SAMHSA also has mandatory trainings. You must travel, you must attend, they're regional, and they're really wonderful for doing exactly what this is, which is my boss and I learned from this program, and we said, what were the problem-solving strategies they used, and how can we apply this to what we do? So they were looking at this issue of domestic violence, and they came up with ranked risk, which is really big in criminal justice, which has its own issues, but for domestic violence dockets, particularly domestic violence felony dockets, there's risk assessment tools that indicate what kind of DV charge. Now, in social services, refer to this as intimate partner violence. On local levels with police officers, they call it domestic violence, and almost everyone uses that language colloquially. So if I am planning an IPV intervention, when they were formed in the 60s and 70s, they were called batterer interventions. And some people still talk about batterer interventions. So we really need to know what is all of the language around it and what are the words that we use. Just like in the beginning of this course, we talked about what are we calling our customers, our clients, our guests, our families, our people? What do we call the people who we serve, our consumers? Now, if you are looking for on our FBI crime data explorer for the state of North Carolina, the violent offenses do not have IPV or domestic violence listed. And so there's aggravated assault. But if you look, one of the things that people are often charged with alongside domestic violence or instead of domestic violence is kidnapping, which is not listed as a violent crime. So first of all, what are we calling it? This is a strategy question that we have to identify. So the community persons, the community groups that North Point identified were residents, the EMS and police dispatchers, municipal and common pleas judges. So we have data from the FBI on a state level, but there's multiple levels of court. And most domestic violence charges never rise above a municipal level, which is the misdemeanor level. And then common pleas judges handle it on a county level, which is a felony level, or a regional level is the common pleas level. And we also have, in this area, we have the North Court, which is not quite those things. It's not common pleas and it's not municipal or village, because, you know, America's big and we have a lot of strategies for courts, and they're organized separately under different Supreme Courts. So there's the Supreme Court of the US, the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio, and the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio oversees different levels based on different offenses. So what our corrections planning board does is support the departments of corrections at those separate levels, hopefully on an evidence-based and research level, to say, what are some of the interventions that we're using that are working or not working? And so they measure the effectiveness of programs and forecast or are writing grants to support initiatives. Police officers are the only people other than the residents and victims and plaintiffs who are on the scene at the moment. So, and there's also court staff. So they looked at all of these groups and said, what do we call this? How do we code this? How do we track this? How do we measure this? Because we're not measuring it on an FBI level because it's not a federal issue. So we're going to stick with aggravated assault because often that happens, and there's all these characteristics of them. So what I love about High Point, North Carolina, is they didn't get the funding and they went ahead with it anyway, because they went through community surveys and they determined there were a number of different items of consensus, and they found out the individual conflict and challenges of different levels of court. So when they engaged with judges said, well, I don't really know what happened. You know, I see what's written on the report, which varies from officer to officer with what happened on the scene. And there's all these subjective things that come into it, right? And when the police officers are writing minimal data, what they're thinking are a few things. First and foremost, if you're a police officer, you're thinking that you are most likely to be injured or killed on the job when EMS has put a domestic disturbance in as your call. That is the most likely place where police officers are set up for executions that are pre-planned. They get bogus calls, and also things like alcohol and drugs make domestic violence much more likely to occur. The other thing that police officers are thinking is, I can't do anything. Even if I press charges, he's going to be out the next day. She's going to drop the charges. And so they really put minimal effort in because they're protecting their own life, which is a natural human concern. And it's exactly what I do every day at my job, is look for situational awareness and ways to be the safest. So they did this survey, which is where the domestic violence initiative came from. And they looked at the police department, all of the domestic violence calls that had come in over a certain period. And police officers, the feeling is, I'm used to going to this house over and over and over again, and I'm so sick of going there, and it doesn't matter when we come, nothing really happens afterwards, right? And when they surveyed it, what they found is the vast majority of people have no previous charges. The vast number of calls, when they look at the data, when the corrections planning board looks at the data, most people have a validated intimate partner relationship. The officer believes that there is a potential for violence. The situation cannot be resolved at first. The intensity goes up. And what they found is if someone has used a weapon before in domestic violence, if the person is a convicted felon, if they're violating a protective order, those are cases they treat differently. So in corrections, there's this concept that there's some people, like the people who would be on the D list, who are so, they call these the choir boys. They're so mortified by having the police called on them. They will never, ever, ever threaten, intimate, drink, be upset around someone again. It's self-correcting. The shaming is self-correcting. And this is the target of scared straight initiatives. So for many people, they do work. They don't work for people on the A list. So we want a different approach and a different intervention, but whether someone is on A, B, C, or D, what they found is they really wanted to empower the police officers who were on the scene, because the police officers say, hey, I got a lot of training, I have a lot of statutes, but what I'm not is a social worker. And what I'm not is a psychologist. And what I'm not is a judge. The judge can figure it out. And so they kick it up like, hey, what should we do? That this is the judge's role, right? And what the judges told their correction planning board and Marty was, we want all the information, because if this goes to trial, the jury is going to want to know everything the officer saw. Now, I'm a social worker. I have been for 25 years. And if you tell me all you need is like the longest progress note every single time I see someone, get out of here. So you've got to incentivize it. The other thing we found is that EMS and police dispatchers, so the FBI does not track this in the same way because it's not a federal crime. Domestic violence people are generally not abusing people in multiple states. That's how it becomes a federal crime, where the state does not have jurisdiction. So within the city of High Point, the corrections planning board people with no money, no additional funding, went through the programming software manual for EMS and police and said, we already know how to do this because we push a button and send accident reports and speeding reports to car insurance companies every single month. So we already know. EMS dispatchers say, oh yeah, if it's a motor vehicle accident, we push this button. Here's the code. So EMS needed their own, the dispatchers needed their own code for domestic violence. So they could track, this is one that we're evaluating. Is this an A, B, C, or D list, right? So domestic disturbance call gets coded. Police officers agree to put down as much information as possible. Municipal judges who see the most of the cases agree to maximum boxcar sentencing, because what they have learned is people on the A list, B list, they have certain behaviors that become trackable and that become things that you can do by data. So I can tell you, I had a family member who was, it was a 20-year-old male who was dating a 19-year-old female who was calling and pressing charges on domestic violence over, she said he assaulted her. He said she's blackout drunk and called me from a party. I tried to drive her home. She was acting out in the, trying to like kick out my windshield, and ended up injuring herself getting out of the car. Nothing is on tape. There's no, they're in a gas station. There's no indication that she's in distress. She comes in, talk to someone, is alone. Everything kind of supports his study, but she's also really, really injured, right? So in Hamilton County, they give him the maximum while he's waiting. So they don't release this person on bond, which is accurate because this guy has a previous felon. Has a previous felony. So this guy should be treated like an A list. The police officers collect all the data, supporting documentations gotten from the gas station attendant, someone whose ring camera was on the way. Nothing is really indicated. It doesn't matter. The maximum charge is like 30 to 90 days in jail for these things like aggravated assault or kidnapping. Kidnapping is not letting someone leave the room, right? Over the course of his jail stay, the 19-year-old female is calling him. And guess what? All those calls are recorded. And so everything she's saying to him, everything he's saying to her can now be used as evidence. And, like we sat and listened to these tapes in court, and it was mortifying, and nobody wins yet. He's not doing the thing that A-list people do, that people who use weapons against their romantic partners and family members do, which is she won't call him, so he calls mom, and mom calls her and holds her cell phone up to the phone so that's not a listed phone call, right? So there's all these games that people play to violate protection orders that may or may not show up on a phone bill that High Point was able to then litigate. So the people who were in High Point, Carolina, had a very similar outcome goal. We don't want anyone else to die in North Point or in High Point, North Carolina, based on the actions of a romantic partner. And over the course of the year, they were almost successful. They had one person die, and they love to tell you that it was actually an out-of-towner. And their greatest success, their greatest outcome, after this unfunded program gained traction and people were held in jail for longer, and they were able to drop charges on people and really focus their policing efforts on these people who, the A-list people, I think they were saying there was an average of 10 calls or more per house. And the officers are able to get that data because we're running the reports and tracking it and giving officers information in the field. They had someone, this is like an old fish, new fish, goldfish story. Two guys are sitting in jail, and the officer is overhearing this conversation. One guy says to the other, "Hey, what are you good for?" And he goes, "Domestic violence." And the first guy goes, "You're screwed. They don't like that here at High Point." And like, that is the deterrent that they want, is that the talk around the water cooler, the talk in the drunk tank is like, that doesn't fly in this community. So many of the community building initiatives that reduce HIV risk, child marriage, battering, are when men get together and say, this is not going to work here, and it becomes a part of the social culture. So that's my absolute favorite. If you guys can check out the high point video, it's like 1 minute long, and it's a minor summary. You have the FBI search list. So if you're looking at crime statistics in your area, maybe that will be helpful to you. Have a great week, and I am looking forward to your strategy formations. Let's look at our journals here. Our journal for the week is strategy formation. And what I'm looking for, I put 300 to 400 words. I think you're going to be able to get it done in that amount of time, but this is the strategy formation. So I just walked you through High Point, and they said, these are people we think we're going to talk to, and these are issues we think we're going to have. And my deepest hope is that you all come up with some strategy formation ideas, and that those strategy formation ideas change after you have some interviews with people in your community, and that you have more information and a deeper understanding as the semester comes along. So again, thank you, and I'll see you next week.